Hello everyone, and welcome to Watercolor 101. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and I'm doing it because I've had a lot of questions, and a friend of mine has had a lot of questions about lightfastness lately, and what it means, and why it's important, when it's important, and when it is not important. And so I'm going to go about this in a couple different ways, but first I want to express to you what lightfastness is when it comes to watercolors. And all watercolors have, they're all made with pigments. Some of them are made with dyes, okay? So, for instance, this bright violet by Shinhan is made with a dye. So when you look at it, it will have pigment numbers on it, and this one does have a dye in it. So when they are made with dyes, typically, just like with inks or anything else made with dyes, they are not light fast, which means they are fugitive. So over time, when you use them in a painting, they will tend to disappear or get gray or change in hue, okay? So a little bit later, after I paint some swatches out, I'm going to show you a painting made by J.M.W. Turner in the 1800s and tell you why it looks so strange now. Because back then, the artists did not know about lightfastness, and so they used whatever pigments were available, and today we have many, many more. But typically, the ones that were made from minerals and gemstones and earth, the earth pigments and those pigments were very, very light fast. So those would remain on the paintings, but the ones that were made from things like beetles or minerals, not minerals, but the chemical that created the color alizarin crimson, I can't remember exactly where it came from, but they were not light fast, and so certain colors that they used would disappear over time. Typically, blue pigments are very light fast, and pink or violet pigments are not, okay? So just going through a few other brands, this is Daniel Smith, this is Serpentine Genuine, which is made from a mineral, from a rock, okay? A gemstone or rock. And it's genuine serpentine, and gum Arabic solution, and it has a light fast rating of 1. And these things are listed on the tubes of mass-produced watercolors. So another one made by Rublev, who uses only basically minerals and earth pigments. This is French raw umber, again a light fast rating of 1. Typically, almost always, paints that are made with gemstones and minerals are highly light fast, okay? Another one, Winsor & Newton, this is phthalo turquoise, which is a chemical pigment, a modern pigment that was not available when Turner was painting. And this one is PB16, and it has a light fast rating of A. So Winsor & Newton uses a different numbering system. Some use 1 through 4, 1 being the best light fast rating and 4 being the worst. Winsor & Newton is A through D, I think. And they have a couple different ways of marking their tubes, but all mass-produced watercolors like this will have a light fast rating on the tube. M-gram, there's, says light fastness 1. Again, this is an earth pigment, raw umber. Now, if you look through some of the colors, for instance, in Winsor & Newton, and let's say you look at alizarin crimson, it will have a light fast rating of 4, which means that it's not very good. It's fugitive, and over time, it's going to fade and turn gray, okay? Another color is opera rose, which is made from a dye, and dye-based opera rose will fade over time and normally has a very poor light fast rating. Aureolin yellow, which is cobalt yellow, has a very poor light fast rating because it tends to gray over time. And the funny thing about that pigment is that it tends to gray more when it's in the shade. So they're all different. But most pigments that you buy are highly light fast and stable. So why does this matter? It matters when we paint something that we are going to frame and then sell to someone else or even keep in our own home, because over time the painting will change and fade. Okay? So in good faith, when I'm painting something that I'm going to sell, I will only use light fast pigments. Now, I can rely on what the tube says, okay? And I do sometimes, but I also do my own light fast rating tests. And all artists who want to sell their work should do the same. It is the ethical thing to do. It is really up to the artist to make that decision and to know that the product that they're selling is going to stand the test of time. All right? I'll tell you why it's important to do your own, because one time I had a cobalt blue that was acting really strange on my paintings. It wasn't acting normal. And so it was a mass-produced pigment. I believe it may have even been M gram. And I swatched it out and did a light fast test on it, and it did change rather quickly. And I contacted the company and they had a bad batch. Okay, so it's really important to do your own light fast tests if you notice behavioral issues with the paints. And I do it regardless. Okay, when I buy new paints, I make a light fast test, unless they are pigments that are earth-based, okay, from rocks and minerals and gemstones, because those do not fade. All right, so I'm going to show you how I make a light fast test, and it's fairly simple. I just use a piece of watercolor paper or mixed media paper, and I just swatch the colors out. Now this color I'm using here is alizarin crimson, but it's a modern pigment called permanent alizarin crimson. So while it isn't quite as luscious as the original, because the original is quite luscious, it's a very close replica of that color. And do you notice that I'm swatching it out rather big, okay? And I want to make sure I have a fairly even application of paint. So I'll just kind of run over it a few times. I don't mind if there's streaking, but I want it to be as dark over here as it is on the other side. All right, so that is just a nice swatch of alizarin crimson. And then I'll just go across my paper and test as many as I can. This one is phthalo blue. These are all Winsor & Newton paints. So I'm swatching it rather large on my paper, and I'm just making sure I have a nice concentration of it on the page. Okay? And then I'm going to let this dry and show you some other things, and then I'll show you how I mark it and what I do with it. So back to why light fast ratings are important. It all depends on your intentions for your work. So if you're doing sketchbook art, it doesn't matter. Your sketchbook is going to be closed. You're not selling it. You can use any pigments you want. If you're doing personal work for yourself, just for your daily sketchbooks and things like that, watercolor meditations, origami, all of those things that we do that are not meant to sell, those paints will last decades, okay? So I don't worry about it for those, ever. I don't worry about it. If I were painting, if I was an illustrator and I was painting something that was meant to be photographed and then printed in a book, I wouldn't worry about it. Typically, the colors that are most fugitive are the really bright fluorescent colors, so alizarin crimson or opera rose. They're very, very vivid. And those are, there's a range of watercolors called Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiant Watercolors, and a lot of illustrators use them because they're so vibrant and they photograph really well. They reproduce really well, but they are highly fugitive. They are all dye-based. So the other thing, if we're using inks to paint with, okay, most inks, I'd say 75%, are made out of dyes. And so over time, if they are in the sunlight, they are going to fade. It might take decades, but I cannot in good faith sell a piece of work, okay, that that is going to fade or change over time. So for my own personal work, for fun sketchbook things I don't even think twice about it. But if I'm going to sell a painting, I will always want to consider Lightfast rating. So while this dries, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this Turner painting. So this painting was made by Joseph Mallard William Turner, and it's called Study of Sky, circa 1820 to 1830, and it's a watercolor on paper. And it is in the Tate Gallery in London. And this picture was framed, but when anybody takes a look at this and they think Study of Sky, they think it's really strange that it's kind of this rusty red. What you are seeing here are the earth pigments left over after all of these years, all right? So the color alteration in this painting is extreme. There has been a combination of blue lost from the indigo because indigo was commonly used and it was a highly fugitive paint. Today we make indigo in an artificial way or with other minerals and earth pigments that are completely light fast. You cannot get the kind of indigo that Turner was using anymore. It doesn't. They don't make the pigment anymore. And then vermilion red was used in the gray sky, and the same blue lost from the indigo and the brown ochre mixture is used for the foreground landscape, and the white paper also yellowed severely when it was exposed to light because they didn't have the archival papers that we use now. So it is still possible to see some of his intended effects in the sky, the grayer and darker clouds to the left side, and those had black mixed in them as well. And on the right, there was less red used and more local variation. So the clouds were more bluish purple on this side originally, and then paler toward the horizon. So originally, they say that the sketch illustrated the contrast between a purplish gray cloudy sky and a brownish green foreground landscape, okay? And all of those earth colors are very familiar to us today, and we use them all the time, and they will stand the test of time, as you can see, okay? He also used, I think, probably Indian yellow or yellow lake, which are also not traditionally available anymore. They make the same hue, but those original pigments that he would have used are not available anymore. And those faded even more readily than the indigo. Okay, so, which is why many landscapes from that time in watercolor tend to look bluish, having lost some of the yellow. So when they mix blue and green to make blue and yellow to make green for grass, you get a big loss of the yellow right away, and then you ended up with kind of a grayish blue where the indigo faded. So anyways, this is just, a small example, okay? When you see some of Turner's landscapes that still look blue, it's because he used Prussian blue, okay? And Prussian blue is highly light fast, all right? So that's sort of an example of what happens to a painting. This painting used to have beautiful blue-violet skies with dark gray clouds, and over time, those colors faded. And then you're just left with the earth pigments, and some black. That's it. Okay, so I hope you found that interesting. And now I'm going to show you how I complete my Lightfast testing. So once I have painted the swatches and allowed them to dry, I mark them. And I'm going to mark them down here, and I'm going to mark them by color. So this is alizarin, crimson, permanent, and then I write the brand, Winsor and Newton, and then I write the date. So today is May 1st. All right, and then I'll mark this one, Payne's Gray, And this one is actually Daniel Smith. And the date, 5/1/18. And the reason I mark the date all the way across is sometimes I only start with 2. I just do. I just always put the date down because it reminds me. Then once I have that marked, tear it out of my sketchbook, and I simply cut it in half, right through the middle. And then I'll just cut this paper smaller. Okay, so now I have 2 sections of the paint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one, or it really doesn't matter, but I'm going to put one of them in a sunny windowsill. So if you have a window with a southern exposure, that is best because the sun is strongest there. And I'm going to put this in a sunny windowsill, and then the other half I'm going to put in a dark drawer. After 2 weeks, I'm going to take the 2 pieces and put them together, and then down here I'll make any notes of changes. All right, and then I'll put this back in the sunny window, put this back in a dark drawer, and wait another 2 weeks. And I do this for about 2 months, about 8 weeks, okay? And usually, if it's in a very sunny window like that, unprotected, if it is not light fast, you will start to see a little bit of a change, okay? Again, for something to really, really change, it might take decades, but usually watercolors are framed under protective UV protective glass, and so that retards the fading a little bit. Never ever, no matter if your watercolors are light fast or not, never ever hang a watercolor on the wall where it gets direct sunlight, because no matter what, it's not going to be good for it. Your paper will start to curl and things like that. So always choose a non-sunny place to hang a watercolor painting. So that is basically it. That's how you do a Lightfast test. And I highly recommend it if you are at all considering selling your paintings. If you are not, or if you're considering framing your paintings to hang in your home and passing down through your family or things like that. If you're doing it for little projects like dandelion lessons or origami or watercolor meditations or seeing drawing exercises within a sketchbook, don't give it another thought. Okay? Typically, you will find, again, that the brighter colors that are dye-based and certain pigments are the ones, there are very few, and you can look them up online, there are very few that have poor light-fast ratings. Generally, the earth pigments made from minerals, gemstones, rocks, dirt, like the umbers and ochres, those usually have very high light-fast ratings. And again, it never hurts to do your own test, as I learned with my experience with that one bad batch of cobalt blue. Okay? So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm not an expert on this in any way, but this is just what I have learned through my own research and from other people. And so that's the best I can tell you. All right? I hope this is helpful. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It is actually sunny and 70 degrees in Buffalo today. Yay! Flowers are coming up. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks so much.